Our next speaker tonight is Anja Monrad, who is Senior Vice President and General Manager at Dell Technologies in Central and Eastern Europe. You have also connections to CBS since you graduated from here? Yeah, and following your graduation, you worked in different companies with marketing and communication. And then in 2000, you were employed in Dell, where you had various leadership responsibilities until you ended up as in the position you are today. Yeah, so we look so much forward to having your advice and sharing your experiences.
So thanks for having me, and it's really going to be tough to follow Sarah's act here. I got invited to talk a little bit about my own career, but also to talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion and why that means a lot to me. And luckily, while I was sitting there, and it's not a big surprise because I did actually read your book some time ago, a year ago, I think, when it came out. But I was thinking, what if we totally disagree, and that could be a good discussion. But there wasn't that many points, so hopefully we will be a little bit in agreement. And I will probably skip a little bit of the explanational slides around diversity in the end, because I think that was covered by somebody that's way more into the stuff than I am. So, but thanks for having me. And I do definitely agree with Sarah that there's like no way you can see what's on the slides here on this computer. So, but luckily I don't have a lot of things on my slide. I'll talk a little bit about my career, but I'll start with this slide. It took me a very, very long time to be able to stand in front of an audience and actually feel comfortable talking about myself and giving advice. And it started roughly 11, 12 years ago. I got a phone call from Accenture, and it was a couple of weeks before Women's International Day in March 8th, and they said, hey, do you mind coming and talking to us about, being successful women in business? And I was like, who are they talking to? Are they sure they called me? I'm not really considering myself being a role model and being successful. And it wasn't really the first time I got that call, but it was the first time that I got a call from a very big organization, and it was supposed to be hundreds of people there. And it took me a little bit of time to really get into this. I can do this. I can stand up in front of a big audience. And since then, I've had audiences of thousands of people where I've standed up and said, hey, I'm successful. I'm super good at what I do. I'm actually damn good at what I do. And that's what got me to the position I have right now. And I am one of the very, very few women in the stats that Sarah showed that actually made it to whatever you want to define as the C-suite in business. So I'm happy to do that, and I spent a lot of time actually sharing, because I do believe in role models. And I do believe that when I was a young student and a young woman starting my career, there wasn't that many role models. And I've actually been through a lot of all of these training programs that Sarah spoke about as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So what is my career been all about? So just as Sarah mentioned, I'm not Danish either, actually. So I'm born in Poland. My parents came to Denmark when I was 3.5 years old. So I would consider myself Danish. When somebody asks where you're from, I automatically say Denmark. I don't think about any other option. But I'm not born here. So I actually grew up being a little bit different. And I mention that because I think it's a defining moment for some of the things in my career. Then I graduated high school. I was a matematisk fysisk student, as it was. And there wasn't that many girls in that line of high school back then. And then I started here at CBS. At that point of time, we're actually called Handelshøjskolen i København. And when I say that, my son would really say, hey, that really aged you. Mom, nobody says Handelshøjskolen i København anymore. It's CBS. But I graduated back then, and then I started in IT. I started as a trainee in a IT company called Digital Equipment Corporation. It doesn't exist anymore. It got bought by Compaq, and then later Compaq got bought by HP, but it was called Digital Equipment Corporation. It was the second largest IT company at that point of time in the world. And there wasn't that many girls there either. I was 23 years old. I was graduated with a Kantmærke from here, and I definitely thought that I would go out and rule the world and be a boss and a director or a manager immediately. The last thing I really wanted was to sell IT in a sales department. But I got a job as a trainee, and I thought, I'm going to do this for a while. I'm going to learn something. The salary was actually pretty good. So this is 30 years ago, and I got 24,000 Danish kroner a month for being a trainee. So that was actually pretty good. I was like, hey, I can do this for 6 months, and then I'll figure out what I want to do, but I'm definitely not going to sell IT. That was for sure. I graduated from CBS, and I wanted a management position. That was sure. But then I really got in love with this whole IT universe. And now, 30 years later, I'm still in IT, and I think that's the most exciting industry to be in. And I'll talk a little bit about why we need more women in IT as well, and hopefully motivate a lot of you to join that industry as well. So I joined there. I was in digital for all 8 years before we got acquired by Compaq. But 5 years, it took me 5 years to actually one day get a phone call from my manager who has spoken with the general manager at that point of time. And they say, hey, do you want to be the marketing manager? Like overnight. And the reason for that being that I was one of these salespeople that constantly complained about marketing not working. I didn't get this support, I didn't get that support. I was a new account salesperson. Nobody knew who digital was when I went out. There was no CRM systems. It was like really not working. So I built my own CRM system. Back then, there was like not really the same IT infrastructure as you have today. So on paper, and I kept complaining about this marketing support not functioning. So he gave me a call and said, hey, if you're so smart, you think you can do it better, here you go, here's your chance. So overnight, almost, I became the marketing manager of a department of 6 people who were all men and much older than I was. And they had been in IT for a long time, and the marketing department was kind of a place that when salespeople didn't really have it in them anymore, they got put into the marketing department. So that was the people that I was gonna manage. At that point of time, I was 29 years old, and I was also pregnant. And that was not really what I thought would be happening in my career at that point of time. So my GM also told me when I told him I was pregnant, he said, hey, that's gonna be the most important time of your life. So you should really enjoy being home with your newborn and just take your maternity leave. It's going to be really, really amazing time. 5 days into, at that point of time, you could actually be in the hospital for 5 days when you gave birth. On the 5th day, I got a phone call while still in the hospital that one of my people in marketing resigned and they didn't know what to do and should they hire somebody. And I was like there with my baby, kind of going, okay, this is not really good. So I started working a little bit. And I'm saying that because I only had 3 months of maternity leave. And then I started working slowly. I had an au pair. She would bring my son with her to work. And I would breastfeed, and then I would work a little bit, and then I would work a couple of days, and then I would have a couple of days off. But in reality, I had 3 full months, and then after that, I was working on and off. And I say that because there is difference between women. Not all women are the same. And some women want to have a full year of maternity leave. Some want 6 months, some don't. And I think that's the beauty of the diversity we have, that there is not one right way of doing things. I do pride myself of having raised an amazing young son who is super skilled. He's from CBS as well. I don't want to point him out, but he is in the audience today. So I thought I would bring him because at least then, you can see he looks kind of normal, right? You can actually get kids and raise kids, and they can grow up as being normal people without having to have a year of maternity leave. But you can have a year of maternity leave also. So, but the point being, he has a dad, and they had a great life together when I was working, and maybe I started traveling a lot in my work very early on, and maybe they had a little bit more of like candy and a little bit more takeaway food than I would have loved them to do, but nobody was damaged by that. So, I got my first management job, and then from there on, we got acquired by Compaq. And at that point of time, I was a marketing manager. There was a marketing manager in Compaq, and you obviously don't need two. And then I changed the role a little bit and got to work with communication. And then 2 years later, I got fired. And from the very outset of that merger, it wasn't really a merger, it was an acquisition. The culture was very different, and there wasn't really good space for somebody like me in that organization. And being responsible for communication, I was not fully aligned with the general manager in what we were communicating. And he was the general manager, I was not, so I was obviously the one to leave. And I would say I wasn't happy for the 2 years I was in Compaq, and the culture wasn't the culture I wanted to be in. And I should have left, but I didn't because I was stubborn. I thought I could change things, and I could beat her, I could stay, I could do something. But it was actually a good idea. So after the first couple of emotional feelings of, I'm not somebody you fire, I'm somebody that leaves. And after I cried for a day or two and having to get over that feeling, I actually realized that that was the right thing. And it was actually also an amazing learning to be let go. Because having tried that somewhat early in my career, I've never since been afraid of being fired. Because I know what happened, and I know how I acted, I know how I activated my network, how I started looking at new opportunities, and how easy it actually was for me to find a new job. So ever since then, that wasn't really a scary situation. And I do wish for all of you, and don't get me wrong, that you actually do get fired pretty early in your career. So you get the experience of that not being an awful disaster that you will never recover from, because you will. So I learned a lot of things around that and how to deal with that. And then I decided to work for a company called Unisys. So I applied for a job there. I got offered a job there, and that was a huge mistake. I stayed there for 3 months. David, my son at that point of time, was a couple of years old, and I thought I'll just have an easier job. I'm not going to travel that much. It's going to be super convenient. It's close to home, and I was bored to death. And after a couple of months, I got an opportunity to join Dell, and I realized that it's better to leave early. So I found a replacement. It took me. I realized after a month that was a mistake, so it took me 2 months to find a replacement, and then I left. And I joined Dell, as a executive assistant for the senior vice president of Northern Europe. So that's kind of like a assistant that does everything that the manager doesn't really want to do. You kind of do like a direktionsassistent. So I kind of do a lot of super exciting things that I wanted to get out of marketing. I wanted to get into more general management. And the marketing that I was leaving was the more relationship, branding type of marketing. And then I joined Dell. And after 3 months, the marketing director for Northern Europe got another job, and I was there on the leadership team, and I had marketing experience, and they all looked at me and say, "Oh, maybe could you do some of the marketing in an interim period until we find somebody else?" And I said, "Sure, I can." That's what an EA does. They jump in and do stuff if needed. So I did, and I stayed in marketing for 13 years. So it turned out to be a little bit a long interim period. And the thing that I realized was that marketing is a lot of different things. And the marketing that I was doing in a much more transactional type of business was where we had a call center and we had online back then in Dell, and Dell was pioneering online trade way before Amazon or any of those were even existing. We were the world's largest online trade portal. And what I realized was marketing was really the power center of the organization in a transactional business. So if there's no calls coming into the call center, then sales can't really do anything. If there's nobody clicking on anything on the website, then you can't really sell anything. So that's what drives the whole business. And I realized that that's what I actually like to be. I like to be in the part where you're being measured, you're being held responsible and accountable for the business, but also obviously on the spotlight of the power of the business. And I'm not afraid to say that when you put a plus and minus list on what are the things that are motivating you and what are the things that are draining you, I need to be part of the decision making and I need to be part of where things happen. Otherwise I get super frustrated. So I actually found out that marketing was super exciting. And then from there on, I had 13 years of Nordic roles, European roles, global roles in marketing, and I spent 6 years having teams all around the globe and managing our $1 billion marketing spend in Dell. So a lot of money, a lot of TV ads, a lot of ads and stuff happening around the whole world. And I spent a lot of time traveling. And then in the midst of all of that, I had a brain aneurysma that ruptured. That's what's called hjerneblødning also in Danish. Normally when people have a brain aneurysma, 50% die on the spot. Of the 50% that don't die on the spot, they normally either die when they get to the hospital or get brain damaged. It's a very, very tiny percentage that actually comes out without any brain damage. And that got me thinking around a lot of things, around my career and what I want to do and how I want to live my life. And another advice I want to give you is don't wait for that like life-defining moment to think about what you want to do with your life. Because a lot of people that I know, it happens when either they get cancer or other things, they start thinking about, do I want to work, don't I want to work, how many hours, how do I want to spend my life? And you can think about that without having to have these things hitting you, right? But I actually decided and realized that I wanted to live my life the way I do. I love working, I love traveling, I love having a lot of things to do. And I was actually happy with the work-life balance I had in my life at that point of time. But after 6 years of sitting in an airplane, going to the US and going to China and going to Brazil and being all over the place with jet lag all the time, I realized I wanted to do something completely different. And I said to our CMO at that point of time, who was my boss, and the European president, that I wanted a new job. I wanted out of marketing and I wanted to try something else. And next time they were doing the reorganization, they needed to find me a different spot. And the closer we got to the reorganization of marketing, there wasn't any other job for me defined yet. And I had been very clear, I don't want to do anything in marketing anymore. I didn't have the passion for that. And the one thing I had learned with my brain aneurysma was I want to do things with passion. So we got to the date. There wasn't any other job, and my now ex-husband said at that point of time, "But shouldn't you just stay if they don't have any other job?" And I was like, "Nope. If there isn't any other job, I'll just leave and find something." And then one day I got a phone call from who's now my ex-boss, but was the European president, and he said, "Hey, you speak Polish, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Because we do have a job in Eastern Europe, so that could be interesting. So can you interview for that?" And I thought they were talking about the general manager position for Poland, but it turned out that they were talking about the regional manager position for 32 countries in Eastern Europe. And I had zero sales experience and sales management experience. I had sales experience from my early days in my careers, but never had any sales management experience. So I never really thought that they would give me a job of managing a full region like that. The joke was a little bit that they said, "Hey, that's because you speak the language," and we didn't want to tell any of the Americans that they actually spoke more languages than Polish in Eastern Europe, but that's kind of a joke because I know they knew that was not the case. So that's how I ended up, and that's 7 years ago, and I've been managing Central and Eastern Europe ever since. 3.5 years ago, we bought another company called EMC, and we merged those two companies together, and I got the privilege of managing both of those. So there is a couple of learnings, and I'll flip through a couple of these slides a little bit fast while talking a little bit of the points that I spoke about in my story. There is the quote of Alice in Wonderland, and I do believe that knowing what you do will help you get there. And the quote from Alice here is, you are eventually going to get to whatever you want to do. And you don't necessarily need to have a career plan. And again, diversity. Some people really thrive with having career plans and to-do lists and being very, very clear. Others are not. And you may end up exactly the same place. When I look at my friends, both male and female, there's a huge difference how we got to where we are today. I am a to-do list person. I need to know what I need to do and how I'm going to get there, and that helps me structure my mind. I love putting things on paper and then scratching it out. Just the satisfaction of scratching it out is really great. So for me, it helps knowing where I want to go. That helps define my brain. And I had a plan. I knew I wanted to be a manager before I was 30. I knew I needed to be in the center of power to feel that I could influence things. Not for the sake of the power, but because I actually wanted to influence things. So in that case, you need to know where you want to go. At least you need to start thinking a little bit about it. And again, we're all different, so what worked for me is not necessarily going to work for all of you. And then I totally agree with you that there is no leaning in needed. I think women have leaned in a lot, and we've done all of the leaning in we need to do to have equality in the world. But there is something around daring to take chances and do something. So when I spoke about my career, I did a lot of things that was my first. I'm not saying the red thread in my career is probably I jumped from job to job without really having any experience in what I was going into. But I did bring something with me every single time, but I did do a ton of different things. I managed online in Europe way before online was a big thing. We started doing banner advertising. That was super cool back then. We did email marketing. Nobody had done that before. I knew nothing about online when I started doing that. Then after that, I started building out a CRM system. Never done that before, like really with an IT system, building databases. That was the first time. Then I got my global job, and I started doing small and medium business campaigns in China. You know, every single time there was something that I hadn't done before. And I kept going, okay, the worst thing I can do is, I was like, not going to totally mess it up. And my mom is a doctor, and she would always go, but nobody really died, right? It wasn't really, there wasn't any blood, nobody died, right? It's like, no. So I think we need to be better, and that's not just women, but I think we need to be better at taking chances and trying something, and then the worst that can happen is you're going to learn something from it. I know that when I got the job I have today, I got it partly because I was a woman. Because my boss really believed in bringing in diversity into the team, and again, not just one, but starting from somewhere. And I have no problems with being put into that. There was a lot of things I didn't know, but I knew I was good at managing a global team. And this was a regional team, so it couldn't be that much different. I knew I was good in building strategies because I've done that in marketing for many, many years. And I also knew that I was a good change agent, and they needed somebody to change the culture in that team. And I was that person that got parachuted in to help shake up a little bit, and with the macho guys that were in that team. And I was sitting one evening in Athens with my new group of peers, and they were all bold. A lot of them were South African. There was some of them were black, and there was this he's a very dear friend of mine today, but he was very intimidating the first time I met him. Very tall, black, bold, and he said, "So Anja, so what have you done in your career?" And I was super proud. So I said, "I've done this and this, and I've done this, and now I got this regional job." And he was managing another region. He was managing all of Africa and South Africa. And then he just looked at me when I was done, and he said, "Okay, so what you're basically saying is that nothing of the things that you have done in your past have set you up for this job." And I was like, and I didn't know what to say, and it took, 5 minutes later, you know exactly what you should have said, right? But at that moment, I was so intimidated, and that was the culture. And I just decided that moment that no matter what, I just wanted to be better than him. And from that point of time, all of the guys in that team, every time there was a dashboard, I just wanted my team to perform better. Because they did not believe that this marketing girl that have been 13 years in marketing knew anything about managing a region. And on top of that, I was a woman, and there have been no women in that team ever. So I decided to make that statement, and it worked out pretty well. There's a couple of other things here that I've added, and part of it is a little bit connected with my brain aneurysm and just, really wanting to get the most out of life. And it sounds a little bit like a cliche, but, I think you get up in the morning, and how your mindset is going to define how you're going to be for the rest of the day. And I don't believe anyone gets up in the morning and actually want to be an asshole for somebody else in another team, right? Everyone really wants to get up and do a good job. And I think that, being positive and wanting to do the things and having passion is going to make you better at what you do. So I do believe that you can actually talk yourself into becoming better, and that there is no limitations to what you can and cannot achieve. So I love the PP quote, and I try really to live by that quote as much as I can. So I'll talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion, and I come from an American company where we coupled those two things. We haven't always been doing that. We spoke about diversity for a long time, but for the last couple of years, we actually speak more about the inclusion part than diversity. Because just like Sarah said, diversity you can count and you can say, okay, we got 3 of those. But if you don't have an inclusive environment, then you're never going to bring that diversity to work. So I think those two things go hand in hand. when I think about diversity and inclusion in my own career, I was there in the 80s when we had the Fix the Women training courses. So I've been on the Fix the Women training courses. That was when I was one of the only women in the IT company I was in, and I was taught how to behave, how to talk to a male audience, how to make sure I never had loose hair, always have my hair up, because when you have loose hair, I was told, there's a risk you're going to touch your hair all the time. For many, many years, I did not have loose hair. And then at one point of time, I was like, damn it, from now on, I'm never, ever going to put my hair up. I'm always going to have loose hair. So I always do that now. And then in the 90s, I did get trained in the courses where we were starting to appreciate the female values. But then you should also still be taught on how we could help you as a woman. So we got on all of these special programs to be helped. And then, luckily, many years later, we got into this stage now where we actually value the diversity. And we value creating an inclusive environment where different opinions are actually helping. And so I'm not going to talk to you about what the different values of diversity is, but we spoke a lot about gender, and there's obviously much more than gender in the diversity discussion. And for me, this is not about equality of 50%. It's not about it's the right political thing to do. For me, it is really a matter of, I do believe in the business imperative that the more and different opinions we have, the better business decisions we're going to make. And I've seen tons of examples of where a homogeneous team makes decisions that are not the right decisions, but they just don't know because nobody actually tells them to think about something else. And we all get into that when we're with like-minded. And there's no doubt in my mind, and maybe somebody that actually does research in this area can tell me otherwise, but I have no doubt in my mind that it's way easier to manage a homogeneous team, and it's much more difficult to manage a diverse team. But in my worst times of managing my team, which is really diverse, both in age, in gender, in culture, in ethnicity, in actually also sexual orientation, in religion, sometimes I'm kind of I just wish they were a little bit more like me and just had a little bit more respect for authorities and just a little bit more yes, let's just do it the way you say it. But that only goes for a couple of seconds, and then I'm back to believing in diversity. So inclusion for me is really bringing the whole mix to work. And we've done a lot in Dell to train. So we've kind of gone through the path of training and trying to change the culture. So all managers, we're 160,000 employees around the globe. All managers around the globe have been trained in anti-unconscious bias, or understanding unconscious bias, and dealing with diversity and inclusion and trust, and creating environments where people can actually be themselves and bring their ideas to bear. And all employees, 160,000 employees, have been taken unconscious bias awareness trainings. So, and we started this many, many years ago. Michael Dell, who's the founder of the company, is on the board of Catalyst, which is one of the American agencies that work with diversity and inclusion and do a lot of these trainings. And Michael have been on the diversity agenda for many, many years. Michael also has 3 daughters and a son. And I think there is a lot of research that also shows that CEOs with daughters are much more focused around diversity than CEOs without daughters. So I think that have also brought a lot of that focus. And then we've done a lot of focus on female entrepreneurs, because Michael is an entrepreneur himself. He created the company, And we do believe that female entrepreneurs is going to help the whole world economy thrive much more. And being a female entrepreneur is super difficult as well. They can't get vendor funding, but we can talk much more about that. So unconscious bias, I really get irritated when somebody says that they're going to pick the best candidate for the job, because I think that, just as we heard just before, it's very difficult to actually judge what is the best candidate for the job, because we do all have biases. And I've been on bias trainings, and I've thought that when somebody said to me the first time, you should go on this unconscious bias training, I was like, I have been one of the odd ones since I came to Denmark with my parents. I know I'm not biased, and I know I'm all for diversity. And I got so surprised to learn about my own biases and to understand that my management team were actually having more native English speakers than would be natural for that type of team. I was managing at that point of time a global team in marketing, but I had actually more English native speakers on than I had Chinese and Brazilians or French people. And I found the combination of extroverted, energized, and English speaking, for me, was equaling higher competence and just better skilled for the job. And once I started realizing that, I really started looking at the types of people I had on my team, not the gender, not the ethnicity, but really much more what type of people I had on my team. So that was a huge learning for me. So why is this super important? I think that Sarah has spoken about all of this, but I think this is for me one of the most saying examples, and I do a lot of these diversity and inclusion presentations as well. We all have biases, and there is no doubt that nobody have ever said to a candidate, you're just not tall enough for this job. But we do all have views on what is the right leader. And I think Dansk Industri actually did a couple of years ago research where they asked, do you want a male or female leader, and what do you feel most secure with? And there's no doubt that in times of crisis, we all look at these tall, white, 50 years plus males, because those are the ones that look like they're going to bring us safely through the crisis. And when I came and visited my team for the first time in Romania, not only was I not very tall and not male and other things, I also came with my Danish leadership style, with delegation and empowerment. And, you know, I was sitting there together with my Romanian general manager, and we were talking about strategy, and I kept going, so what do you think we should do? And how do you think we should do in Romania? And I learned that when I left, he had said to one of the other guys in the office, that she has no clue what we're going to do, right? And it wasn't that I had no clue what I wanted to do in Romania, but my style was not to come and tell him, he's Romanian, he's been running the business for a long time, how to run his business. But in his view, first of all, it was a woman. He never had a woman manager. And secondly, I didn't come and tell him culturally what to do. That was a very, very difficult thing. So we all have views on what's the right manager and what's the right boss. And this one, for me, is super sane. The other example I want to give you is there was this research done in Bechdel test done in the US back in 2015. They took 4,000 Hollywood movies. That was crowd research, and they took all movies from 95 to 2015 and asked all of these crowdsourced researchers to go in and watch them and see if the women in the movie spoke about something else than men. And it was very clear that if the instructor, the photographer, or the writer, none of them were women, then the women in the movie would talk about men. If just one of the three changed, it would change the statistics. But you needed all three of them to actually have a full women, empowered hero in the movie. And that kind of keeps building on how we bring stereotypes onto generation after generation if we don't change these pictures. And hence we also need women into IT. And because the reason we need more women into IT is that IT is defining the world and digitalization. And in the last couple of months of Corona, if it hasn't been clear before, I think it became very clear in the last 6 months that IT is the way that the society is running. Whether it's homeschooling, working from home, or it's online shopping, it's artificial intelligence, it's machine learning, all of that going forward. And there is a huge risk that if we don't have a diverse industry, we're going to build a lot of bias into artificial intelligence, and we're going to build a lot of bias into the way that IT will define the future. I'll give you this example. If you search on IT engineer in Google, this is going to be the picture you're going to get, right? And somebody is sitting there and making the tags saying IT engineer is this. And if we continue doing that, you can do the same with nurse. You can do it the same with a lot of other things, and you're going to get the same pictures. But another one that for me is even more critical is if you type in lægen tager sig af sine patienter, you're going to get the translation that says the doctor takes care of his patient. If you say the same thing with a nurse, it's going to be a she. And again, somebody is coding that. So we need more women. We need a balance into the industry so that we are not going to make those mistakes. And there's a lot of other examples, but we don't have that much time. Sarah mentioned the words. I have been called bitchy, bossy, a lot of very, very nasty things throughout my career. I can definitely talk to it's being a fine line that you have to maneuver. I'm definitely a feminist. I've never tried to behave like a man. And there's a lot of words that keeps being put as tags onto the way that either man or female, but now I'm a female, so I talk to it from this way. And words like pushy, that's not necessarily the nicest way of saying that you're good at persuading somebody. Or that I've been told tons of time, more than I can ever count, that I'm emotional. And that it's not good to be emotional. For me, emotions, if you have no emotions, you're not going to be passionate about things. And I think passion is the one and most important thing to be good at what you do. So I want a lot of emotions. I don't want people that don't have emotions. But I want to make sure that you can tailor, or your emotions so you know when to use what. But hey, I've cried at work, and I am a very emotional person. I cry very often over a lot of things, and if I get really emotional, I cry. My team is used to that. My boss is used to that. It goes very well. So I'll leave you with the last thing around this. I think we're all different, and that's the beauty of it. And it's not about being different from somebody else. It's being different like somebody else. And I want to end with a quote my mom said when I was a kid, and that's again back to being, different have been really life-defining for me. Being an immigrant child and growing up being different and having parents that didn't speak Danish properly until many, many years later and still speak with accent today. I remember my parents we were eating different food. Today I kind of look back on it and saying they kind of knew what they were doing. We were having like really, really healthy green. We were eating beans and vegetables, and we were having pasta before there was anything else than spaghetti in Denmark, and a lot of things. But back then it was super embarrassing. And I remember I came back to my parents and I said to my mom, I want to be like Jeanette, and I want to be like this, and I want to be like that one, and why are we not having this and this food, and why are we not doing this that way? And then my mom said, hey, stop wanting to be like everyone else. Be the girl that everyone else want to be. And just let them want to be like you. And I think that was, for me, not necessarily at that point of time. I wasn't really agreeing with that statement. But now I really know what she meant, that it's not about just being different from others. It's just being different like anyone else is. And you don't have to aspire to be just like everyone else. So that's the word. I think I'm almost on time. Please stay in touch, and I know that Sarah and I will take questions, right? So.